2 months ago, I released a building demo for my museum game. Since then, I've been gathering feedback to plan the next update to the demo and refactoring large amounts of the game code in an effort to follow good coding practices that I've since learned after starting the project. There's a lot to get into, from your fantastic museums to interesting technical details, so welcome to the 6th devlog for my museum management game. How's it going, everybody? I'm Lewis, also known as Skeffels. I'm a software engineer and hobby game dev. I like doing both software and games because they complement each other well and I can bring ideas from one to the other. A lot of this devlog focuses on those kind of skills. However, unfortunately, my news is that I was recently made redundant from my role as a software engineer. 45% of my company, roughly about 80 people, were let go, which triggered a months-long consultation period. This caused some delays in my game development schedule, as there was a lot of uncertainty for some time and I had to find a new job. Luckily, I was fairly quick in finding a new role. The job market for software engineers seems great right now. I'm excited because I start soon, probably around when this devlog airs. In the meantime, I've had a few weeks to catch up on game dev and the museum building demo. Let's start with the demo. I released the demo back at the start of September. I asked for your feedback and I received some fantastic responses, as well as a number of screenshots of your museums. I loved seeing them all and I appreciate everyone that took the time to check the demo out. A lot of the feedback was about how you interact with the game. For example, the demo runs on a small fixed screen. You can't resize it, nor can you zoom in or out, making it tough to see on big screens and awkward to make big museums with. Another issue are the controls. You place items with the mouse, move around with the arrow keys and hold R for remove mode. That's an awkward combo to do at the same time, so I want to look into improving the input. For example, I'd like the ability to move about with the mouse and toggle remove mode with the R key. Other common comments were to include a save option, an undo button, a fill area feature, and a search for items. I think all these ideas are great and would really improve the demo. I've added all the feedback I can into the public roadmap and I'll be looking to add them into the next demo release. In the meantime, I've been continuing my journey with test-driven development and I'm now in the refactoring stage. The refactoring stage is incredibly important because it's where you take working code and turn it into maintainable code. How I've been doing this is trying my best to make the code follow the solid principles and using design patterns like the factory pattern to simplify the original code. For those unfamiliar with solid code principles, I put some links in the video description for you to check out. Essentially, how I applied them was to split game logic into a data model, a view to render, and a controller to change things. This is very similar to model view controller patterns that web applications often use. The grid is a great example of this in practice. It has a data model which stores the state of the grid, a view class that has a reference to the data in order to render the grid, and a controller class that also has a reference to the data in order to change the grid state. This is great because each component focuses on one thing and can be tested independently. For example, the grid controller can be tested without the need to load content, render the game, or take player input. I also mentioned using factory patterns. For those unfamiliar with factory patterns, I put another link in the video description for you to check out. I used the factory pattern to clear up the original grid code by reducing the amount of repetitive lines and unnecessary variable declarations. For example, when you add an item to the grid, it can be on a background, cell, corner, or edge index. The original add to grid code dealt with this with a number of separate functions for each index and used a switch statement to decide which to call. Each type of index needed different information, so the main function created variables for every type of index, regardless of which was being processed at the time. Honestly, this grew out of control, because every function the grid needed, it also needed individual grid index functions, a switch statement to decide which to call, and additional variables. This is where the factory comes in. The factory generates an implementation for you to use without having to worry about the details of that implementation. So the add to grid code gets shrunk down to its basic logic of, is this specific area available? If so, add it to the grid. Again, this is great because you get to focus on what your function is doing rather than getting confused with the specifics of the different implementations. Once your core logic is in place, then you can create the implementations you need without worrying about breaking that logic. Implementations can sometimes feel very similar to each other and repetitive, however I think the benefits outweigh those concerns. You can test each implementation independently and easily add new or remove existing implementations in the factory itself. I'm getting close to finishing this refactor. I think the main grid code is almost done and I just need to make some changes to the tests as they're mostly the same as before. Once that's all done, I can move on to updating the input system as it's a little basic right now. All it can really do is assign functions to get called when a key or button is pressed. It'd be great to expand this to include more advanced actions, for example, double tapping keys, dragging the mouse, and scrolling the scroll wheel. Once the refactor is complete, I will turn my attention back to the demo feedback, making as many changes to the demo as I can. This should put the game in a great place to start adding new features such as pathfinding and NPCs. I'm really happy with where the game is heading right now. If you haven't tried the demo out yet, there is a link in the video description for you to play. And make sure you're subscribed to get notified when I release new devlogs for the game. I hope you've enjoyed watching this devlog for my museum management game. Leave the video a like to let me know you did, and comment to give me any feedback. Thanks for watching, goodbye.